London-based designer working to create an eco-friendly alternative to leather. In her lab, she collaborates with chemists to create a green tea solution that serves as the base for her textiles. And in this next video, she explains the theory and kind of the idea behind creating her different garments.
My name is Suzanne Lee. I'm a senior research fellow in fashion and textiles at the Centre for Balkans. My research project is called Biocouture, and it's looking at the whole idea of whether we can grow clothing using bacteria. Essentially, the recipe is using a green tea solution with sugar solution inside that. And then you introduce a mother culture, which contains a mat, which is a symbiotic mix of yeast and bacteria. And that culture feeds on the sugar nutrient in the liquid. And the byproduct of that process is that the bacteria spin a thread of cellulose, bacterial cellulose, and all the threads stick together. We create a sort of non-woven mat. And that's what we're harvesting. And this is textile. We were trying to think of a way of constructing a wooden body, if you like, that we could then begin to create dried finished shape onto. So that's going to give us a formed front and back, and then these flat sheets will become the sleeves, and then they'll get sewn in to this sort of shape. Even after all the time that we've been growing it, and understanding the optimum temperature, the right quantities, and the ratio of nutrient to tea to culture liquid, we still end up with a varying quality of material. So that's why Paul and Alex in particular are hopefully going to take this to the next stage, really understand exactly how the bacteria are growing.
The problem with bacterial is it absorbs massive amounts of water, and because of the chemistry, up to 98% of its own weight, which makes it, if you want to wear it, rather heavy and cool.
So what we're hoping to do is try and either explore how we might increase the production of the material by optimizing how we grow the bacteria, how we might change its properties a little bit so that we can actually make material so that we know it's quality material, that every batch we make is the same quality.
I guess the original vision was a garment emerging from a vat of liquid having been completely shaped by these microorganisms.
So as you can see, they're still working with and trying to find solutions to a lot of the problems. And if you're curious, Emma had actually kind of just come back from London and had visited Susan Lee in her studio, and she can tell you about the garments and many years later how they look now. So while the idea of wearing a garment produced from a bacteria may not appeal to many, it still is worth considering. Moving now to a different idea of new materials, the term haute tech is being used to explain how high-end fashion designers, such as Francisco Costa at Calvin Klein, are using and implementing technologies into their collections. Costa has been experimenting with manipulating textiles to give them a unique appearance. However, this has left many fashion journalists and editors stumped when trying to figure out what is the dress made of. To me, this is a very realistic example of how the fashion industry will actually be implementing technology into their collections, as opposed to creating an LED dress. If you take, for instance, the LED dress that Katy Perry wears, or even Beyonce, those are more performance pieces, more costume pieces. But I think right here with manipulating, working with the textiles, creating new versions of it, that's something that's a bit more realistic that will be implemented into fashion.
Okay, so the production and materials side of fashion and tech is really what's given the most consideration in literature and exhibitions. There's sort of two of the most straightforward approaches to the topic. The second two categories, though, that we have, aesthetic and function, are a bit more abstract in their consideration of the effect of technology. And they refer to how technology outside of the fashion industry, in a way, has had an effect on literally the way fashion objects look and how they are used. So this means that the objects themselves are not necessarily very technologically advanced in and of themselves. So as we see in the case of this jacket from the 1920s, this is made from a silk crepe. It's not constructed or printed or created in any very technologically advanced way, but what it represents with the engineered print across the back is a shift in the aesthetic of fashion objects and the decorative motifs that we see on fashion. In the early 20th century, it's important to recognize that there was a huge shift in the pace of everyday life as a result of technology. From early motor cars to rising skyscrapers to early modes of air transportation like Zeppelins, the pace of everyday life was drastically shifting as a result of technology. And so you see in art and design a very heavily geometric visual vocabulary emerging to express these technological changes in art and design, and also in fashion with these objects here, with both the textile behind and the jacket itself. In the 60s, we also see this aesthetic influence of the International Space Race. So the space race was a hugely important event for culture in general, and we see it being used in interesting ways by the fashion industry as an aesthetic element. So quite literally as the decorative motif in the paper dress that's on the right, where you see the rocket launch very prominently displayed on the front of the dress. But then also on the left, we have a couture ensemble by the designer André Courrèges. And for this piece, what he was using as a reference point, he was creating the total ensemble of what a fashionable woman would wear when she went to outer space. Now, that sounds kind of ridiculous to us now living in the 21st century, but in the 1960s, if you think about it, at the start of the 1960s, you have the first man orbiting the Earth. By the end of the decade, you have the first men landing on the moon. And 10, 20 years before that, commercial air travel wasn't really viable for the everyday person. 10, 20 years before that, automobiles, motor cars were brand new and weren't everywhere. So for people in the 60s, it seemed that if we continued on this speed of technological development, that you give it 10, you give it 20 years, we will all be vacationing on the moon. So fashion has to come up with what we would wear when we got there. So as you see, again, not necessarily using incredibly technologically advanced means of production, but using technological advancement as the inspiration for the overall aesthetic of the piece. Similarly, here we have a piece from London-based designer Simon Thorogood from 1997. For his collections, he was creating, he wanted to create a fashion for the future, something that didn't reference anything that came before it, but something that was still very much entrenched in the traditions of fashion. So he was using very traditional materials and means of production, using Duchess satin and couture sewing techniques. But to create this future fashion, he was looking at the aesthetic of technological development, specifically pilotless drones or stealth aircraft that were being developed by the military at this time. He looked quite literally to an almost obsessive degree at the shapes and forms and designs of these aircraft, to the extent that this piece actually, all the different shapes and forms you see here are taken directly from the different pieces that are put together to make a pilotless drone. Also, the color of the dress, the gray, is matched exactly to the color of the first pilotless drones. And the name dam dress for the dress is actually taken from the name of part of a fuselage of the drones. Simon Thorogood himself has even claimed, is fully aware of his obsession and actually admitted that he learned how to fly planes as well during this time. So really kind of fully entrenching himself in these new technologies. But then coming up to the latest collections, here we have a dress by Louise Gray, who's an up-and-coming London-based designer whose background is in textile design, actually. And this is a dress from her Autumn-Winter 2012 collection, where for the textiles in this piece, she was taking inspiration from QR codes or quick response codes. You guys are all probably familiar with quick response codes, the digital update to the barcode that can be scanned by smartphones and devices to give you immediately a range of information, be it video, text, imagery. And what's interesting though is that Louise Gray took this aesthetic inspiration a step further. Not only is it in the textiles on the dress and in the tights of this piece, but on the right you also see the QR code that she used as the invitation to her runway presentation. So kind of taking this all-encompassing idea of technology a step further, people who wanted to come to the runway show had to scan the QR code to find out when and where the runway presentation would be. Moving on now though to function, again this is similar to aesthetic in the sense that it's important to recognize that these pieces that I'm going to show you are not necessarily technologically advanced in how they're made or what they're made from, but they exist as a result of technological innovation. So these two pieces here are some of my favorite pieces from the show actually, because they show this interesting way technology has influenced fashion design. On the right we see a bicycling ensemble from the late 19th century, and on the left we have a duster from the early 20th century. So the bicycling ensemble is made of wool, the duster is made of linen, but they each exist and were created as a result of technological innovation. The bicycling ensemble features, though it looks like a full-length skirt, it is actually what's called a bifurcated skirt or a divided skirt, meaning it is full-length trousers. So very wide-leg trousers that are designed to look like a skirt when the woman is dismounted from a bicycle, but are in fact trousers so that when a woman is on a bicycle, she can ride it and function properly with this new technology. Similarly, the duster is designed and was introduced to the fashion industry as a result of early motor cars, which, if anyone's familiar with their design, look very much like carriages. They do not have the protective covering that cars do today. And not only that, since these new vehicles were so rare, we didn't have much paved roads at that time. So even at the high speed of 30 miles an hour, if you're going along, you would kick up a lot of dust from the roads and ruin your clothing if you didn't have something covering it. So you got fashionable dusters introduced, such as this one, which was distributed by Bergdorf Goodman. And here we see a illustration from La Mode Illustrée, which was a very prominent fashion magazine at the time in France, that illustrates how important these new types of garments were to the fashion industry, with the illustration showing the woman in the early motor car in her duster, and also the woman with her bicycle and her bifurcated skirt. Of course, as we get into the 21st century, function and fashion in relation to technology takes on a whole new meaning as we get into the stage of integrating electronic hardware into the fabrication of garments. And so what we see here is a jacket from the German company Infineon Technologies. What this jacket is it's not only a jacket, but it's simultaneously also designed to be a telephone and an MP3 player. So this is not the case of having a jacket that you can hook up your telephone to or charge your MP3 player with. The jacket is a phone and an MP3 player, to the extreme where if you see on the cuff of the sleeve on the right-hand side, you see the control panel for the MP3 player on the jacket itself, where you can skip, play, pause the tracks that are coming from the earbuds that are coming out of the collar just there. Similarly, we have here Vivienne Tam's digital clutch, which she debuted on the runway in 2010. Her digital clutch is quite literally a computer. She collaborated with HP to produce these pieces. But as you can see from the runway shot, they are designed from their size to their decoration to be a clutch, to be presented as a high-end luxury accessory. So even to the extreme where they are distributed that way as well, as opposed to an HP or Apple computer that you would go and buy from a tech store that might come in a cardboard box with foam and all of that. The Vivienne Tam digital clutch comes in a very beautiful embossed box that then has a beautiful dust bag inside for you to carry it around in the same way you would get if you were consuming an extremely high-end handbag. So in this case, we have really technology becoming an accessory, so really changing our notion of the technological device in relation to the fashion industry. And then the final piece that I'm going to show you here to illustrate how technology is really pushing the function of fashion in new directions is this tiny little device. It's the smallest piece on view in the Fashion and Technology exhibition. It's probably about the size of a silver dollar. It's called the LilyPad Arduino, and it's a microcontroller board that was invented and developed by a professor at MIT. What is so unique about this particular Arduino board is that it's designed to be sewn into garments. So what you're seeing here in this picture is conductive thread being sewn through one of the holes at the side. This board can be connected to a computer and then coded in the computer to perform a variety of functions, which then, with this conductive thread and other elements, you can transform any garment into a very interesting new device, something that can light up LEDs, play music, monitor your vital signs. In the case of Leah Buckley herself, the creator, what we see here is she's created a cycling jacket using the LilyPad Arduino. So on each sleeve at the end, you see that she has attached 2 buttons, and then she has 2 arrows at the back with LED lights. When you hit either button, it makes the LEDs on the back of the jacket flash to indicate which way you're going to turn. You can also hit each button at the same time and make hazard lights the way you would on a car as well. But then that's a fairly sort of basic implementation of the LilyPad's capabilities. What we have here is a dress called the Climate Dress by a Danish company called Diffuse. What they have used the LilyPad to do is they have programmed it on the computer to sense the CO2 levels in the air around the LilyPad, and then light the LEDs that are embroidered onto the dress accordingly. So as a result, the garment becomes a pollution sensing dress. And they debuted this by having the model that you see here walk through the urban city center and monitor the varying CO2 levels in different urban spaces. So here we see the LilyPad really changing the way we think about the functionality of a fashion garment, really what a fashion garment can do. So I'm going to play this video from Burberry for you, which will sort of bring the presentation to a close. So there's really no way to predict ultimately what the next stage of fashion and technology is definitively, what we will see in 10, 20, even 5 years from now. But what we've tried to show you guys today and really express is the vast range of projects that are out there that are currently developing, as well as the many different ways that technology and fashion have interacted previously.
So some ideas to think about when you see fashion and technology in the future and to keep in mind is that fashion garments that are implementing technology, they're always going to be a beautiful garment. I think one of the main things that both the industries really need to do is to understand each other. We can't have a fashion designer saying that they're creating a techno garment or a technological device when really it's just a cell phone case. And we can't have engineers creating something that also isn't beautiful. We really need them collaborating, working together, and really understand the end use for both of it so that we have a technological garment, something like Hussein Chalayan's piece, maybe something a bit more functional, but something like that that integrates fashion and technology. Something else too to keep in mind is the sustainability, the future of it. If you take, for example, 3D printing, a perfect way that that could work in a very sustainable manner is through doing body scanning. If you have a body scanner, you can be in California and you can have your body scanned for a specific dress. You can then have it printed using a 3D printer in New York. So as you can see throughout the presentation, many different ways that these technologies can be implemented, finalizing and completing with Burberry. Really a company is on the cutting edge, implementing it both in social networking, now literally bringing it with microchips being built into their garments that are customized and really authenticating the garment, making it really a very customized piece just for you. So we thank you, and if you have any questions, please let us know. And I believe that we're going to give you too just a little brief background of both of us and our graduate programs that we have come from.
Yeah, do you want to repeat yours?
So I had started, the professor said, I had started in California. I did my undergraduate degree really focused in art history, but I was very interested in art history, but I was also interested in fashion history. Coming from California, there really isn't any master's programs out there, but I thought that somewhere there had to be some programs. So doing some further research, I had found FIT, I had also found NYU. When trying to decide which program I wanted to go to, FIT is a bit more object-based, really working with both the conservation and working first and foremost with the object, then later on with the theory. Graduating from that program, very excited, then doing various internships. I had interned at NBC Universal in their costume archive, Calvin Klein, and then also the museum where I now work there in the costume department. So kind of just a brief overview.
I took a bit of a different route. I went to do my undergraduate degree in Scotland at University of St Andrews. I also, though, did art history. I was coming from a bit more of an academic background, and so I knew a lot about the art industry and the art field, but I wasn't aware of the application of fashion into museums until I got familiar with the collections and the exhibitions at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And they were doing really great work, and I had the opportunity to intern with them for a bit, and from that realized the potential for these exhibitions and for fashion and textile collections. And so I decided to continue my education in the UK at the Courtauld Institute of Art in London, which has a fantastic history of dress program. It is much more theory-based than object-based. Most of the programs in London are that way. They're not as heavily object-based as some of the ones in the US, but they are still fantastic, and you do have an amazing resource in London with the different museums and collections that are there, and also the different designers that are there as well. They're really sort of very open to students collaborating with them and interning with them as well. So I do recommend, if anyone's interested in going abroad to work with this topic, the programs at the Courtauld Institute, also the Royal College of Art in London, are really fantastic programs to look into as well. So yeah, should we open it up to questions, I assume, maybe, if anyone has any? No one has a question about anything?